Alex here. Just to let you know that there was a problem with my microphone, so the audio quality on my side was a bit awkward this time. I apologize for any inconvenience, and I fixed the issue so that future episodes are much clearer. Thanks. Hello, and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Drew Simon to talk about cryptocurrency and blockchain. Drew, welcome to the show.
Alex, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for the work you're doing. As someone who's spent their career in the nonprofit sector, I can certainly appreciate the importance of the work you're doing. So it's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is mine. And before we get started, I wanted to know, what is your superhero origin story? That is to say, how did you get started working with nonprofits and even with cryptocurrency?
It's interesting. I don't really have too much of a superhero origin story. I would say so my career started actually in higher education. I have a Master of Education degree. And I guess, universities and colleges are technically nonprofits, although they don't always seem like it. And I worked in a number of different roles within universities and colleges in Ontario, in Canada, mostly in student support and engagement roles. Started to get a little kind of disconnected from the work, I guess you could say. And at the same time, throughout my time working in that sector, I'd been volunteering on a number of boards with different charitable organizations. I'd also completed a certificate program in nonprofit management. It was something I was really passionate about. It was always something I knew I would end up in. And then, I decided I was just going to go for it. So I left my job in the nonprofit sector, in the higher ed sector, worked with a couple different nonprofits. After a few years doing that, I decided that where my kind of passion lied was in helping nonprofits kind of grow their capacity to raise funds, to engage with new technologies, to support their mission, to support delivering their operations more efficiently. So I started my own consultancy where I mostly do fundraising on strategic planning for nonprofits, which I still do today, but not as much as at the beginning. And a couple of years, about 3 years back, I started diving into cryptocurrency, and start to see some of the positive use cases for nonprofits. And I won't dive into this now because I know we'll do that a bit later. But I started to see some really cool opportunities for nonprofits. So I started to then bring that into my consultancy as well, and started advising nonprofits on how they can use this technology for good. So I don't have too much of an exciting story of how I got into the nonprofit sector. I mean, growing up, I always was very inspired by the change makers, I guess you could say, that woke up every day, gave it their all to make the world a better place for others, and I wanted to do the same. And so I was always drawn to the nonprofit sector, and it just kind of happened as I knew it would in time.
It's been more than 80 episodes now, and I like asking the question of how people get started, and I can't tell you that there's a trend. Everyone has their own little story. There are themes along the way, like they fell into this space accidentally or stumbled across it, or they started from day one. It's just been a family tradition. But there isn't really, aside from those major themes, everyone has their own little journey to how we got here. Among all of them, there tends to be this stickiness that once you get into this space, you don't really want to leave.
Exactly. And it's the same with crypto and blockchain, I would say, which I'll dive into a bit later on too. It's funny. So totally agree, though. It's something that's, easy to fall in love with the work and the space.
So let's get into it then. In terms of cryptocurrency and blockchain, let's start with maybe a high-level definition of what is cryptocurrency and then what is blockchain, and we'll figure out then next steps after that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll go back to kind of the origins of crypto, I guess, to kind of help explain it. And so the original vision for Bitcoin, which most people would be familiar with when they think of cryptocurrency, often Bitcoin and crypto are viewed synonymously, although there are thousands of cryptocurrencies out there. So Bitcoin was launched in, I believe, 2011 in the wake of the banking crisis of 2008, and was meant to serve as a peer-to-peer digital medium of exchange that doesn't rely on like a central authority, such as a bank or government. So, for example, if I were to send you money, Alex, I'd have to use a service like PayPal, or in Canada, we have Interac eTransfer, which uses that central authority to send that money. And, at the same time, the money is issued by a central authority, that is the central bank, the government. So cryptocurrencies exists outside of that, the need for that centralized authority. And at its core, crypto is a virtual currency secured by cryptography, and which exists on a decentralized, and I'll explain this when I get into blockchain, peer-to-peer network, which is called a blockchain. And it's interesting because I would say that cryptocurrency is a bit of a misnomer because there are a lot of different quote unquote cryptocurrencies or blockchain based tokens that aren't intended to be used as currencies. There's those that are called governance tokens, for example, which users can purchase to be able to participate in the governance of an organization or, a social movement, those sorts of things. So there's lots of different types of digital assets. So I prefer the term digital asset. And there are also those that are like centralized versus decentralized. So although cryptocurrency is meant to be decentralized, there are centralized cryptocurrencies as well. Those issued by a centralized authority like a corporation, or there's governments that are exploring their own digital tokens as well. Commonly referred to as central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. And so, yeah, there's kind of that difference there as well. But really, the true cryptocurrencies are meant to be those that exist on a decentralized blockchain network, meaning no one entity has control over it, and it's governed by the users, the distributed network of computers that is all over the world.
So cryptocurrency is the currency, and the blockchain is the technology that allows the cryptocurrency to work.
Yeah. And so I can explain that a bit too. And, I will say too that I'm not a tech person, as you know, by my background. I worked in the higher ed sector, nonprofit. But I think the beauty of this too is that you don't have to be a tech person. Just like how me and you on Zoom right now, we don't know the code behind Zoom, which programming language was used to design it. We don't know how our email gets from one person to the other. It just does, right? Because that's the technology. And I think it's the same about, in the world of crypto and Web3. You don't necessarily need to know the intricacies, but, at its core, it's a distributed database or ledger of transactions, I guess you say, like a spreadsheet that is distributed amongst a network of computers all over the world. So these computers could be referred to as nodes, and these nodes are essentially responsible for maintaining and securing the network in lieu of a central authority that would typically do that. So on a blockchain, as a transaction occurs, so let's say I send you a couple Bitcoin or Ether or something like that, they're then recorded on a block of data. And each block is then connected to those before and after, creating a continuous chain of data that shows the exact record of transactions. So essentially a database distributed across the world, which keeps the record of these transactions and where the cryptocurrency lives on. And one of the key features of blockchain as well that makes it special and that really makes it shine is to facilitate the use of currencies and mediums of exchange is this immutability. And so what that means is that data entered, so transaction records, cannot be changed and lives permanently on a transparent digital ledger, which makes it really hard for fraud to take place. It eliminates concerns about the idea of like double spend. So I send you money, but it doesn't properly get recorded, and then I send you the money again, even though I don't have it. It eliminates all that because it's all in an immutable, transparent ledger that can't be altered. So that's kind of it at its core. I mean, I could dive into this for 10, 20 minutes trying to dig a bit deeper into the different consensus mechanisms and everything behind blockchains that allow it to work. I'd recommend your users, look up some Explain It Like I'm Five videos. There's some great ones out there that really do a good job of explaining more of the kind of mechanisms behind it.
You talk about Zoom. I'm a bit more technical than most people know, actually. So actually, I do know how Zoom works, and the concept is a good one in the sense of we all drive cars, or most of us drive cars. We don't need to know the exact mechanisms of how cars work. We just need to know how to use the car for our purposes, how to get from A to B. But so
exactly.
And the idea here was just to give a starting point for the tech, and just making sure people are familiar with the fact that cryptocurrencies, the currency, the blockchain is a technology, and more or less the major pieces that go into each of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't need to go further than that on the tech side because we'd lose too many audience members.
Well, I think it's an important message too for those listening in that, you don't have to be a tech expert to engage in this space, because I think that's one of the common perceptions out there. So, yeah.
There's also a common perception when blockchain was introduced and Bitcoin was introduced. For a long time, there was nothing to it. It was pennies. It wasn't worth very much. And then we all know at one point it went to $50,000 US, crazy amounts, then crashed and up and down. And at this point, there seems to be it seems to have a little bit of a negative stigma associated to it. I don't know if it's because of the volatility or the uncertainty, or that banks are pushing against it because, of course, they don't want to be ousted from this entire system. They like being that middleman collecting those service charge and transaction fees. So it makes sense that from their perspective, they don't want blockchain and Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in general to flourish. But is there another reason? I have a sense that there's another reason why there's a slight negative stigma that's outside of those entities.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you said is definitely true. There are lots of industries that are threatened by this, especially the banking industry. So there's reason for them to be concerned. But there's definitely many legitimate reasons also why there is a stigma. Unfortunately, there have been a lot of bad actors in the space that have really cast a shadow on and crypto blockchain. I call Web3 is often the catch-all term for all these kind of blockchain-based tools. We've seen scams, tons and tons of scams that have caused folks to lose lots of money, mismanagement by prominent crypto firms like crypto exchanges that have, again, resulted in people losing a lot of money, a lot of trust. There's been a lot of that kind of, speculative behavior around cryptocurrency, which isn't necessarily anything wrong with that of folks wanting to, engage in more risky kind of casino-like behavior. Again, there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with that, but that's often been associated with this space. So people look at crypto and think, oh, it's just a big casino. It's all a big kind of Ponzi scheme sort of thing, right? So I think that because of those bad actors, because of those scams that have taken place, it really has casted a negative shadow on the space as a whole, because those are the things also that get on the news, right? It's the people losing $100 million, not the fact that $100 million in crypto was donated to Ukraine in the months following, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, right? The positive side of things. That doesn't always make it in the news. The hundreds of millions of dollars lost by people from these collapses does. So I think that people are, right to be worried about crypto because there has been those, those issues. And so it's important when they engage with the technology to do it safely and really learn as much as you can and test the waters before going all in.
The concept of blockchain, at least not even the concept, the actual practicality of blockchain, it's meant to be secure, right? It's meant to be reliable, unhackable. And of course, with every new technology, there's going to be some bumps in the road. But I want to make sure it's clear that it seems to be, at least from my perspective, and you can chime in, that it's meant to be a very robust, very secure, very reliable type of currency. And I don't know enough about finance to maybe ask this question quite properly, but I'll try my best. Like currencies have backing, right? People rely and they trust in certain currencies because they believe there's institutions behind them that support it. Is that the case for blockchain? Do they need them? Is there something that's there that can really add a sense of comfort and trust to cryptocurrency and to blockchain?
Yeah, for sure. And of course, I'll start by, saying the classic disclaimer that none of this is financial advice, of course, and make sure to do all your own research and all that fun stuff, because there are risks in this space, of course. And, blockchain is inherently very secure. And, when I think about the scams that have happened and those sorts of things and the hacks, those haven't themselves been of like, Bitcoin itself hasn't been hacked, and had money drained from someone's wallet, those sorts of things. It's incredibly, those are incredibly secure. It's more just, issues around folks engaging in scam behaviors or creating kind of Ponzi coins or those sorts of things, right? So the technology itself is meant to be very secure and is very secure. In terms of, whether or not cryptocurrency is backed by anything, that's an ongoing debate is this something that actually, because you look at some monies are backed by gold, even though most currencies nowadays, fiat currencies, aren't really backed by anything aside from like trust, and trust in a government that is the value of the currency, right? But, there's a lot of different things that you could say are backing cryptocurrency. You could say it's the energy that's expended on the network. It could be those that are building on decentralized networks like Ethereum that are building new applications that create a need for the currency Ether, for example, of Ethereum to operate those applications and to be able to do that. So there are things like that. There are some tokens that are being developed as well that are like being backed by things like gold, like tokenized gold or those sorts of, or tokenized natural assets as well, where it is actually physically backed by something. There are things like stable coins, for example, which are pegged to, let's say, the US dollar that might be backed by like treasury bonds or something like that. So there are some currencies that are physically backed by things and some that are backed more by kind of like the network of users that are engaging in it, if that makes sense.
It does. And I like the point that you mentioned that the US currency used to be backed by gold and it's no longer. And now it really is a sense of trust. It has a history, so there is trust that can be made. And versus crypto, which is still relatively new and they're still building the trust. And unfortunately, because of some bad actors that get a lot of attention in the media for probably the wrong reasons, until that trust is there, it's still, well, as of today in 2023, is it still, where do you feel that the position lies? Has the trust been, is it increasing? Has it gotten better? Do you think there's a long way to go before it becomes more universally adopted? Or are we already at that moment and then now it's like, come on, guys, this is the thing. This is where we need to be because of X, Y, Z reasons?
That's a very interesting question. I find that I'm consistently not the best at making predictions about these sorts of things because I'm finding the market always surprises me. And I think that there is still a lot of issues of distrust. I think one of the silver linings over the last couple of years from some of the prominent collapses of some of these big firms and exchanges and some of the scams and stuff is that we've learned a lot as a space. And I think we've matured a lot as a space, and we've learned that we can't place trust in centralized actors to act positively in a decentralized space, if that makes sense, right? Because almost all of the scams and issues that have happened have been around these kind of centralized institutions that have been working in this space, right? The exchanges, the different platforms for holding your crypto, those sorts of things. So that's what I would say. So like trust in the actual technology itself, I think for those that are really working in the space, maybe understand the technology quite a bit, I think the trust is there. I think for those that maybe on the outside that see a lot of these issues and maybe don't understand that it's been mostly by centralized bad actors, I don't blame them for not having trust in it. And I think also too, there is a user experience, user interface issue in cryptocurrency. It's not the easiest for the average person to use right now to go on and set up their own wallet, decentralized wallet, for example, with their own private key that they have to keep secure. And if they lose it, they lose all their funds. So, it's not the most user-friendly experience currently. And there's a lot of folks that are working on addressing that. So I think that also creates a feeling of unease amongst people as well to engage with that technology. So I think until we address that issue of user experience, I don't know if we'll necessarily get to that point of full wide-scale adoption, but we are getting there. And I do think that that is something that will happen in the future as we continue to build in the space and learn from the mistakes of the past.
Yeah, it all comes down to the newness of it. Like every disruptive technology, if you look at Uber, you look at Airbnb kind of thing, now they're a bit more mature. They're maybe even saturated in the market these days. But at the beginning, they were still trying to figure out, trust especially. You're trying to get someone to trust you that you are able to come to their house, to stay at their house. That's a huge issue that they had to overcome for Airbnb. But they got there, got through it, and for a long period of time, it was a really viable choice. It still is a viable choice, even though there's a couple of, again, bad actors out there that unfortunately. So I think it's a lot of parallels between that and crypto in the sense of we're still figuring things out. Like you said, the user experience still has a bit of a ways to go. But at the underlying, the pure technology of it, the use cases for it, the ability to disrupt, to be able to have transactions without that middle person dipping their fingers in, taking a piece of that transaction, that is really, really interesting. And I'm curious to know, what are the more, I want to switch now to the more positive tone of things. Like if we were to adopt these things, especially from the perspective of a nonprofit, what are some positive things that can be, that can come out of a cryptocurrency for nonprofits?
For sure, yeah. And I think, the obvious one is philanthropy, right? There's been a huge growth in crypto philanthropy over the past couple of years. I used the example earlier of Ukraine. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine back in 2022, we saw just a huge wave of donations going to these different humanitarian organizations working on the ground via cryptocurrency, hundreds of millions, in fact, over 100 million. We even saw the Ukrainian government directly post their wallet on Twitter and say, here's our Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, whatever wallets, you can send us funds and we'll use it to help, those that are on the ground here. And it's such an interesting, I've never seen a situation where government's made a direct appeal to people. And then by simply just typing in that address, you could send the money instantly at a very low cost without having to, wait a couple of days for it to go through clearing or to, whatever happens when it goes through the banks, right? So I think that philanthropy is a really interesting one. And the good thing about philanthropy too, I think a lot of folks in the nonprofit sector are worried that if I accept cryptocurrency donations, what if it all of a sudden just tanks the next day, right? The vast majority of charities instantly convert the cryptocurrency to cash and cash it out. And they do that typically through a giving platform like Endowment, ENDAOMENT, the Giving Block. Those are some of the big name ones out there that enable for the cryptocurrency to instantly be converted to cash upon receipt of that gift so that it doesn't lose its value or anything like that, right? So philanthropy is a big one that many charitable organizations have found good use in. The American Cancer Society was able to successfully raise $1 million to fund cancer research. UNICEF has been heavily involved in crypto fundraising, Save the Children, a lot of these big name ones. We've also seen huge philanthropic efforts in response to some of the recent natural disasters, the wildfires, floods. There's been a lot of movements around that. We've seen NFTs used to help fundraise as well, where an artist will put up an NFT collection with a portion of the funds going towards a charitable organization, those sorts of things. So that's the obvious one for nonprofits is philanthropy. But to me, that's kind of just the first use case, the foot in the door use case, if you will, that's fairly low risk.
Well, let's pause there for a second because I'm
Yeah.
really curious about that one. Because if you're taking that Ukraine example, if you're donating
Mhm.
directly to the government,
Mhm.
the underlying theme I got was that it's fast and it's direct.
Mhm.
Does it open the door for the opportunity? Like, if I want to make a donation to, let's say, Africa or parts of Africa,
Mhm.
certain charity organizations in Africa, I know that certain organizations, whatever dollar you donate toward them, there's only a portion of that that actually gets to the
Mhm.
actual end cause because of administration costs and overhead and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Does this kind of technology disrupt that in the sense of by going directly to the source, donating from
Mhm.
donor to the target, I should say, that overhead is minimized so that more of my money is actually going to the hands and the mouths that need it?
Yeah, certainly it can be, and I think it also depends on which cryptocurrency, because some have different fee structures. Which
Mm.
platform that they might be using to accept crypto donations. If you receive them directly to your decentralized wallet, it'll obviously be cheaper than going through one of the platforms that are out there that maybe take a small cut of it. But certainly, I think that that's a huge value proposition, is that it can definitely reduce the cost and the time it takes for organizations to receive funds from donors. Definitely.
Because that is a huge win in my. I mean, there's always going to be transaction costs along the way. I don't think that's going to be
Yeah.
ever avoided, but they're minimal. My understanding is they're
Hmm.
not as there's not much overhead, so that more of dollars get into the actual bank account of the people that are needing that kind of donation. So that is a huge win for nonprofits in my mind.
Absolutely, yeah. And to take it a step further beyond that too, we've even seen cases where nonprofits have set it up where funds can go directly to folks that need it. The clients, for example. There's been pilot programs where folks can send stable coins directly to refugees, those sorts of things. So it goes directly to their account, which they can then cash out at like a local store or something like that, into their local currencies. So where it kind of cuts out the need for all those middlemen, those steps along the way, and goes directly to those who need it. So yeah, I think that that's definitely one of the huge value propositions.
And then you said, I never actually knew this before, that nonprofits usually convert those cryptocurrencies to cash pretty quickly so that you're right, they don't lose value because,
Hmm.
like any other market, the value of the cryptocurrency can increase or decrease. So by cashing out as soon as possible, that gives them a certain sense of confidence, or the donor a certain sense of confidence that it won't be just lost in the waves of the market, that they will actually get the currency or they'll be able to convert it into a currency that works for them fairly quickly so that they
Yeah.
do have the cash at hand. I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because that's one of the big barriers for nonprofits, right? They're worried about the volatility. They're like, yeah, I don't really want to
Mm.
engage in it because what if we lose all of our money that we receive in donations, right? Well, the good news is, yeah, the vast, vast majority of nonprofits instantly cash it out to the fiat currency as soon as they receive it.
And then you touched upon NFTs. If you could explain just what they are and how they work from the perspective of a nonprofit.
Yeah, for sure. So an NFT stands for non-fungible token. What that means is that it's unique. So a fungible token would be like something fungible would be like money, like $5 bill I give you is the same as a $5 bill that you could give me in return. They have the same value, right? They're the same thing. They can be exchanged for one another. Non-fungible token means that that's not the case. It's not fungible. They're unique. They're different. And essentially, what a non-fungible token is a record of something on the blockchain. So it could be like a piece of artwork or something like that. It could even be like representing like a house or something like that, right? There's been examples of people turning houses into NFTs and then dividing up the NFT to different people so they each own a portion of the house, sort of thing, right? But usually when we think of NFTs, we think of like artwork, music, those sorts of things, where there's a record of that NFT stored on chain. So you have that provenance, so you know that this is the only one of this thing that exists, that it's not counterfeit. You can see the path from the artist directly to your wallet, all on the transparent blockchain. And there's been many cases where artists have done charitable NFT projects that have raised sometimes millions of dollars for charities, right? While also being able to tell a really cool story, maybe. So maybe there's an artist that's really passionate about mental health and wellness that puts out a really powerful art collection about some of the challenges associated with mental illness. With let's say 50% of that goes to an organization supporting folks that are suffering from mental illness, right? So we've seen a lot of that as well. Really cool collaboration. And on that note too, like we've seen examples of cases where if you donate, you get an NFT as like a record of that donation, as like a thank you, right? So as opposed to like a thank you letter, you get one of these NFTs that is on chain, that maybe has some sort of really cool artwork associated with it, or something like that too. So yeah, NFTs is a really interesting one. And I think a lot of people think of NFTs and think it's just a picture, like what's the value there? What's the utility, right? But really, they can be a really cool tool to engage donors in a different way and to engage with a new donor demographic as well.
I've heard NFTs described as a digital deed. So just like you have a deed of a
Yeah,
house,
yeah,
deed of a
totally.
house, it's unique. It means you have possession of something. And what that something is can be virtual or it could be in the real world, right? It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be just in one or the other. So that deed that allows you, depending on who issued that NFT, you can do something with that. It allows you, entitles you to certain permissions or access or
Yeah.
authority or property.
Yeah, it can for sure. There's some that can be like get an NFT, it gives you admission to some sort of donor event or something like that, right? Or it gives you the ability to take part in a special community of donors who have all donated to that cause that you have to have an NFT to be able to participate in, right? So
Mm-hmm.
these are all things. It's called like token gating is the idea of it, right? Like is what it's often referred to. So yeah, definitely.
And then how NFTs differ from cryptocurrency. I mean, they're both using the same blockchain technology to operate, but one
Mhm.
actually has a currency value. One NFT might have a currency value because you can buy and sell it. But the idea is that it
Mhm.
represents not currency directly, but more of a deed, ownership of something.
Yeah, exactly. It's a record of ownership of something that's on an immutable blockchain that shows without a doubt that that is the you are the owner of this unique item, and you can see the provenance of that from the beginning.
Okay, so that's everything to do with fundraising. What are the next
Mhm.
benefits or reason why a nonprofit we should explore the idea of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, for sure. So a very interesting use case is around like how you can use Web3 technology to organize communities. So blockchain, the technology can be used for more than just currency, right? It can be used for many different things. And one of the ways that it can be used that's been very exciting over the last couple of years is this idea of decentralized autonomous organizations, referred to as DAOs as the kind of acronym for that. The way I like to explain it to folks that maybe aren't as familiar with it is that if you think of co-ops, which have been around for centuries, co-ops are like essentially a organization that is governed by its members, who each have like a vote, who can shape kind of the decisions of that organization. It could be like a co-op grocery store, or a co-op credit union, or something like that, or some of the more common ones. Um, DAOs are very interesting because it's like a co-op that is you know typically secured by what's called a smart contract, which is essentially a contract that is on the blockchain that is a set of rules that automatically executes when certain conditions are met. And so essentially what can happen is you can create these decentralized organizations that individuals can maybe join by either doing some sort of task like volunteering for an organization or purchasing a certain token or donating to the organization so they gain access to that DAO. And in doing so, they can participate in the governance of that organization. They can vote on matters. They can have a say in how funds are used, those sorts of things. So that's a very interesting one that I think we'll see more of in the future of using this technology to kind of change how we organize communities. So that's another one that's really grown in the last couple of years that has been absolutely fascinating. We've seen all sorts of different DAOs emerge, ones that are dedicated to funding scientific research, for example. So individuals will donate to the DAO, and then all the members will vote on which scientific projects they fund, maybe research into cancer or longevity. We've seen ones where DAOs are organized around like things like tree planting efforts or those sorts of things. Like there's some very unique use cases around DAOs that can really reshape how communities organize around social change movements. And at the same time, I think also opening up a lot of transparency in the nonprofit sector too is, you could see things like voting, which is all on chain. So all the votes that take place are stored on the blockchain that you can see where there's that transparency. You can see exactly how much funds are held in their treasury, for example, all the donations that are coming in. So it just brings a new level of transparency as well to the space that I think is needed.
And this is something they would share, like a nonprofit would share with the public, with their donors, with their
Yeah,
major
it could be
employees.
either. Yeah.
How? Yeah,
Mhm.
I didn't know that's a use case I had no familiarity with actually.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's still in its early stages, but yeah, I think it's something we'll see a lot more of. And it is still something that I think, like, again, suffers from that user interface, user experience issue that, in time, I think will get resolved.
Okay, is there a third or another?
Oh, there's tons that I could. Yeah, I mean, we've seen all examples of nonprofits use blockchain to transparently record their impact and their activities. For example, there's nonprofits that have used blockchain to track the removal of plastic from the ocean, where every step of the process, from getting that plastic from the ocean to sorting it, to delivering it to the recycling center, to getting the finances for that, the payment for that, is all stored on a blockchain that's immutable, so you can see step by step exactly what has happened, the impact. We've seen different organizations that are creating new monitoring and evaluation tools that use blockchain, so you can secure your impact on the chain and see and provide that to donors to say, here's our immutable record of the impact that we've had. So maybe let's say you plant a tree and then somebody takes a picture of that tree, or it's mapped using geolocation data that is then put on a blockchain and saved on there, so you can see that this tree was planted here at this time as a result of this donation. So there's new ways that it can create more transparent experiences for nonprofits as well, which can help restore trust, I think, amongst donors, especially younger generations that have, they very much value transparency and openness because they've grown up in the internet era, right? So that's another one. I mean, there's so many different ones that, so many different use cases that we could, make this a 5-part podcast series, but those are a couple of the ones that really stick out to me initially.
So this recycling, what would be the benefit of publishing the process of recycling or planting trees on the blockchain versus just posting on your website with pictures? There must be some other benefits that come with the blockchain that is not just announcing it on your website or your social media.
Yeah, I think that one of the big selling features, again, comes back to the immutability, right? Is that once something is, on the blockchain, it can't be, altered or removed. So it, cuts down the issue of fraud. By assigning a unique kind of identifier to each action, you can make sure there's not a duplication of, of impact or of actions. You can't say that, oh, this tree was planted, the same tree, this one tree we've said was actually 5 trees when it's really just one tree, because it has that unique identifier that's stored on chain that you can then use to verify that action happened. So those are some of the reasons that why folks would use blockchain to monitor their impact, because it can really just make a more transparent, secure, trustworthy, a lot harder to engage in fraudulent action when you're using a blockchain.
So the underlying theme seems to be about building trust, and that if we're transparent with what we're doing and putting it in a place that cannot be changed, therefore we are a trustable organization.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, part of it, right? I mean, the whole ethos of Web3 is around creating, structures that are trustless, where you don't need to trust another human being because the action is verified on the blockchain, essentially, right? So, I mean, there'll always be ways that you could defraud that, right? There'll always be things that you could do to get around that, or, misreport things that are going on the blockchain, but it makes it a lot harder to do that. So I think that, hopefully in the future, blockchain will be just a technology that is ubiquitous in the sector for monitoring impact, is my hope, for creating more trust. And, and a big example of where this can really shine is, I want to use the example of carbon offsets, right? There's been so many cases lately where that space has just been so fraught with issues of fraud and lack of quality or verifiability, where maybe someone will purchase a carbon offset thinking that they're planting 5 trees, but maybe 20 other people purchased that same one. So 20 people planted those 5 trees instead of that one person, yet they're all paying for those 5 trees to be planted. Blockchain really can help eliminate, that possibility by assigning a unique kind of identifier to each of these things, storing it on a blockchain, so you can see that this one went to this person, this one went to this person, and that, you can see that provenance. Yeah, so that's kind of an example that I've used to illustrate in the past, is definitely the carbon markets which have been fraught with issues over the last couple of years.
Yeah, can you just give me a high level, because I've also read a few things about this, how organizations are purchasing what's called carbon offsets. So they themselves as an organization produces this many tons of carbon, therefore they purchase the equivalent in the opposite direction from somewhere else that will basically bring them to carbon zero or net zero, I think it's called. So is that what we're talking about, or is there another element to this that I don't know of?
Yeah, that's it. And individuals could as well, if let's say they buy an airplane flight to another country and they want to offset that flight, they can purchase an offset through one of the different providers. But unfortunately, these offsets have been found constantly to be very low quality, to not be doing what they say they're doing, to be issued to multiple people for the same offset, even though it should only be one person getting that offset. So it's not actually having that impact of reducing those emissions to a net zero. So that's one area where blockchain, there's a lot of different projects that are looking at storing carbon credits on chain, carbon offsets on chain, so that, it has that provenance, it has that immutability, so that that if you're purchasing a carbon offset, you can see exactly what that offset is. And you can make sure that you're the only one that purchased that and not others as well.
And let's go into that perspective of the donor or the one who is purchasing, let's say, these carbon offsets. Would I, as a donor, should I feel more at ease or more, I'm not sure exactly what the right emotion is, knowing that the nonprofit I'm donating to uses blockchain or cryptocurrency? Like, is there a certain sentiment that is attached to it that is hopefully in the positive direction, saying, okay, because these guys are using blockchain, they're using cryptocurrency, I should feel this way as opposed to one that doesn't use it yet?
It's interesting because I think that a lot of nonprofits worry the exact opposite will happen, right? That by engaging in the space, crypto blockchain, that it'll alienate the traditional donors, that it'll pose a reputational risk. And then a lot of that comes down to the stigmas around cryptocurrency and Web3 for sure. And most nonprofits, the average donor, I think in the States is like 65, I think. Those are the bread and butter of these nonprofits, those monthly donors. They're really worried about alienating those donors if they engage in this space. So it's funny because it kind of almost is the exact opposite. But really, yeah, I mean, I think among the younger generations, especially those that are really engaged in these next generation technologies and that are engaged in cryptocurrency, see that if a nonprofit is really looking to, use blockchain and cryptocurrency to be more transparent in their actions and their finances, that there's a reason that they can hopefully be trusted more, right? Because that's the whole ethos of Web3 is trust and transparency.
It's a good point about the older generation and how they're getting older and maybe donating less. Well, we know that they're donating less. And would you see as cryptocurrency and blockchain as a viable way to start introducing more interest in the younger generation, getting them to donate?
Yeah, I think definitely it's a way to engage with a new donor demographic. I think a lot of the folks that are in the crypto space maybe aren't those traditional donors to nonprofit organizations. There's been some studies done on the generosity of donors in the crypto space. One study found that 50% of folks that held over $1,000 in crypto, I think it was, donated to a nonprofit organization with crypto, as opposed to, I think, 33% of folks that held like stocks, for example, or a different investment vehicle. We've seen examples that the average crypto donation is much, much higher than a typical donation in fiat. We've seen, I think the Giving Block, one of the prominent platforms, found that during one of their giving seasons, the average donation was upwards of $15,000, I think, compared to a typical donation of like $100. And a lot of that too is because, and again, I'm not going to go into tax advice here, but I know that there are some tax benefits for folks donating cryptocurrency as well, that can reduce their tax liability depending on their jurisdiction and those sorts of things. So, I'd encourage folks to definitely do their research on that as well. But so I think that, there's been also like a large shift in wealth. The vast majority of folks that did make a lot of money during the recent bull markets in cryptocurrency were younger, right? Were millennials or Gen X. And so they have these funds that they want to put towards a good cause, right? So I think it definitely is an opportunity to connect with a new donor demographic that you typically wouldn't have had the opportunity to connect with through traditional means. And also too, what's really cool about, crypto and Web3 is that it's really a global movement, a global space. And so it's an opportunity to connect with a global audience as well, not just a local audience. And, that's been the power we've seen in a lot of these things like the natural disasters that have happened recently, is that really a global community of givers supporting local efforts to combat these natural disasters, for example. And maybe typically these organizations would struggle to appeal to a global audience like that. So I think that that's another benefit as well, is that, yes, it can help connect you with a younger generation of donors that very much value transparency, innovation, at the same time connecting you with a global donor base as well.
I love the idea of being able to transfer money to anyone in the world, knowing that 99 whatever point something percent of it actually gets to the recipient as I sent it. There's something very satisfying about that. It's very unifying, very pure and simple, as opposed to the traditional method where who knows how much actually gets there with all the conversion fees and translation fees and payment fees and booking fees and who knows what other fees there are along the way. So that sense of, A to B anywhere in the world, direct from donor to donee, that definitely sounds awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. It's one of the big value propositions for sure for nonprofits.
So how would a nonprofit get started? You mentioned there's concerns about the user experience and wallets and so forth, which we didn't have time to cover really. But how would a nonprofit start exploring this space? Everything they've heard so far sounds great. They've are interested in pursuing further research, get learning more about it, where would be some good places to go, either your own sites or anywhere else that you recommend, to start moving in that space to get better understanding of how cryptocurrency works and how they can make it work for the nonprofit?
Yeah, so I'd say take it slow at the beginning. Just definitely education, education, education. Doing as much research as you can, which I know can be challenging for nonprofits that maybe don't have that capacity to expend a lot of their human resources on looking into this this technology. But there's so many great resources out there. Even through some of the crypto giving platforms like Endowment and the Giving Block, they have a lot of their own resources as well. You can head to our website, cryptoaltruism.org. We're dedicated exclusively to showing the positive social impact use cases of Web3. We've interviewed a lot of nonprofits and charities on our podcast that have used this technology to support their movements of change. We actually just recently launched a new podcast series called the Web3 Nonprofit that focuses exclusively on nonprofits that are using Web3 technology for good. So that's a good one. And we're also actually in the process of releasing a Web3 Changemaker Toolkit. What we're calling it is, it's essentially a toolkit for nonprofits that are interested in using blockchain technology, regardless of their knowledge or comfort level with the technology, to get them to a place where they know what the use cases are, how it can benefit them, and what the next steps are. But I think what I would say to nonprofits is, if you're looking for a low risk way to engage in Web3, is to definitely reach out to one of those giving platforms to get set up to start accepting cryptocurrency donations. And then I don't want you to think that as soon as you get set up, you're going to just start seeing the money flow in. You do have to definitely engage in outreach and have a specific strategy around that to raise funds as well. But that's a pretty low risk, easy way to start engaging with the technology. And then once you do that, you can start exploring some of the other ways that you can use it as well. And so I would recommend just doing your research, finding Web3 organizations that are doing something similar to you. I think that no matter what the focus of your organization, I can pretty much guarantee that there's probably a Web3 organization, whether it's a DAO that we talked about earlier, or a specific, like fundraising community in Web3 that is, dedicated to that cause. Connect with them as well. The crypto space definitely lives on Twitter still. I know there's been a lot of challenges around, Twitter X recently, but it definitely still lives there. So that's a good place to kind of do some of that, initial research. And, if you need a bit more help as well, we also offer a consulting service as well. And so you can reach out to us. You can email me, info@cryptoaltruism.org. And I'd love to, sit down and chat with you about kind of some of the ways that you can use this technology to grow your organization.
We'll be sure to put all the links and the email addresses in the show notes below. But I'm also curious to know, what would you like to see in the cryptocurrency space, blockchain, NFT space in the next couple of years? I mean, I imagine better user experience is one of them, because you've already mentioned that. But is there anything else that you'd like to see that you're hopeful for, or maybe is a better way of phrasing the question, in the next couple of years?
I think the space has a lot to prove, right? There's been a lot of those negative challenges, bad actors lately that have caused a lot of concerns, that have broken down trust. We need to very consciously rebuild that trust from the ground level. And I think the way to do that is just showing those positive use cases of the technology, showing the nonprofits that are using it for good, showing other impact change makers, whether it's scientists or environmentalists that are using the technology in different ways. There's so many positive use cases, and I think we just need to keep shining a light on that, showing that, building up that collective knowledge in the community, and leading the way so that, in the future, other nonprofits can, more easily see what the benefits and positive use cases are for the organization, and feel more confident engaging in that space without worrying about how it's going to impact their reputation or with the risks associated with the space. So yeah, I think we have a lot to prove, but yeah, definitely also working on creating a more seamless user experience for those that maybe don't have that comfort level with new next generation technologies.
I mean, I believe in it. I think it's definitely the future. I hope it becomes more widely adopted because, again, the technology is sound. It's pure. It works. If we can, to your point, shine the spotlight on the positive things, we can get more attention on those and have significantly more positive use cases of it as opposed to the negative ones. I'm really hoping that the tide will switch, or at least we'll get past a tipping point, that it will become more widely adopted and widespread, and then people can really see those benefits coming in.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Awesome, Drew. This has been great. Thank you. I know there's a ton of information we could have gotten into, but the idea here is just to give people a high level, and then be able to contact you or find other resources to help them continue their journey. But I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Alex. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate the work you're doing. It's so important. So let's definitely keep in touch and keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.